Do you give up on God? Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you might completely change the way you see the silence you're living through right now. Maybe you prayed for something with all your heart, and nothing happened. Maybe you cried when nobody was watching. Maybe you begged God for an answer, for a sign, for relief, for just one moment of peace, and all you got was silence. And if you're honest, there's a question that has probably crossed your mind more than once. God, where are you? Because when life gets hard, faith becomes complicated. It's easy to trust God when everything is working. It's easy to believe when doors are opening, when prayers seem to be answered, when hope feels alive. But what about when heaven feels quiet? What about when the breakthrough never comes? What about when you've been waiting for months, maybe years, and nothing changes? That's where many people quietly begin to give up. Not always loudly, not dramatically. Sometimes faith dies slowly. A little disappointment here, a little unanswered prayer there, another painful season, another closed door, another night crying yourself to sleep while wondering if God even hears you anymore. And maybe that's exactly where you are right now. Maybe you still believe, but you're tired. Tired of waiting. Tired of hoping. Tired of trying to stay strong. Tired of pretending you're okay when deep down, you're exhausted. And if that's you, I need you to stay with me until the end of this video, because there's something most people misunderstand about God's silence. And once you understand this, it may completely change the way you see your struggle. But first, let me ask you something. What if the silence isn't rejection? What if God being quiet doesn't mean God being absent? What if the very thing making you lose hope is actually proof that something deeper is happening? Because the truth is, some of the greatest stories in the Bible did not begin with miracles. They began with confusion, with waiting, with pain, with silence. Take Joseph, for example. Joseph had dreams from God. Big dreams, beautiful dreams, dreams of purpose, dreams that made him believe his life mattered. But what happened after the promise? Everything fell apart. He was betrayed by his own brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, forgotten in prison. Imagine that for a moment. Imagine receiving a promise from God, only to watch your entire life collapse afterward. Wouldn't you question everything? Wouldn't you wonder if you misunderstood God? Wouldn't you ask, why would you show me something beautiful just to let me suffer? And maybe you know exactly what that feels like. Maybe you had hope once. Maybe you believed things would change. Maybe you thought this year would be different. Maybe you prayed for healing, for love, for financial breakthrough, for peace, for direction. But instead of answers, life got heavier. And now you're stuck between believing and breaking. But here's what most people forget about Joseph. God was silent. 4 years. No explanation. No clear answers. No instant miracle. Just waiting. Pain. Confusion. Yet behind the scenes, God was moving. Every betrayal. Every delay. Every painful moment. Every closed door. It was all building something Joseph could not yet understand. Because sometimes God is working in rooms you cannot see. And that's the hardest part of faith. Trusting when there is no evidence. Believing when emotions tell you to quit. Holding on when nothing makes sense. And if you've ever felt weak for doubting, let me tell you something important. Even strong believers struggle. Even faithful people get tired. Even people in the Bible question God. David did. David, the same man who defeated giants, also cried out in pain. He said, "How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever?" Think about that. One of the strongest men of faith in Scripture felt abandoned too. He knew what silence felt like. He knew disappointment, fear, loneliness. He knew what it felt like to wait. And maybe you needed to hear that today. Because sometimes we think real faith means never struggling, never questioning, never crying, never feeling broken. But real faith isn't pretending everything is okay. Real faith says, I don't understand this, but I'm still holding on. And if this message is speaking to your heart right now, take 1 second and comment. I'm still holding on. I want to know who's still fighting. And if this is helping you, don't forget to leave a like, because it helps this message reach someone else who might feel alone tonight. Because someone out there is probably one prayer away from giving up. And maybe this video finds them at the exact moment they need it most. Now here's something nobody talks about. Sometimes silence is preparation. Think about a seed for a moment. When you plant a seed underground, everything looks dead. Nothing exciting happens. Nothing visible happens. No progress. No movement. Just darkness. Waiting. Silence. But beneath the surface, roots are growing. Something invisible is forming. And maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe your life feels buried. But buried doesn't always mean forgotten. Sometimes buried means planted. Sometimes the season that feels like destruction is actually preparation. And yes, I know that's hard to believe when you're hurting. I know it's difficult when anxiety keeps you awake, when bills are piling up, when relationships are breaking, when depression whispers lies into your mind, when loneliness feels unbearable, when you keep asking God for help and all you hear is silence. But what if the silence is not punishment? What if God hasn't abandoned you? What if this difficult season is building a strength you don't even realize you're developing? Because pain changes people. Waiting changes people. Struggle changes people. And sometimes before God changes your situation, He changes you. He prepares your heart, your strength, your faith. Because the blessing you're praying for may require a version of you that doesn't exist yet. And I know that's not always easy to hear. Because we want fast answers, fast healing, fast miracles. But God often works slowly. Not because He forgot you, but because He sees things you cannot see. And in a moment, I'm going to tell you something about waiting that most Christians never realize. Something that could completely change the way you see your struggle. But first, if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to the channel and join this community of faith. Because every week we create messages to help people stay strong when life gets hard. And trust me, the next part may be exactly what your heart needs to hear right now. Because here's the truth nobody tells you about waiting. Waiting is not wasted time. Read that again in your heart. Waiting is not wasted time. We live in a world obsessed with speed. Fast answers. Fast success. Fast healing. Fast results. Everything around us tells us that if something takes too long, it must not be working. And slowly, without even noticing, we start applying that same mindset to God. If God loved me, wouldn't He answer faster? If God cared, wouldn't things change already? If God was really listening, why am I still here? But what if the delay isn't denial? What if the waiting has purpose? Think about Moses for a moment. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before stepping into the purpose God had for him. 40 years. That's longer than many people watching this video have even been alive. Imagine how easy it would have been to believe nothing important was happening. Imagine how many nights Moses must have wondered if his life still mattered. But what looked like wasted years were actually preparation years. Because before God trusted Moses to lead people out of slavery, God first had to build strength inside him. Humility, patience, wisdom. And maybe, just maybe, the same thing is happening to you right now. Maybe you're not stuck. Maybe you're being prepared. Prepared for a relationship you prayed for. Prepared for healing. Prepared for responsibility. Prepared for purpose. Prepared for a blessing too heavy for the version of you that exists today. And I know what some people might be thinking right now. But I'm tired. I've been praying for so long. I don't know how much more I can take. And honestly, that feeling is real. Even Jesus understood pain. There was a moment before the cross when Jesus himself prayed in agony. And for a moment, heaven felt silent. Let that sink in. Even Jesus experienced a moment where suffering felt overwhelming. Which means your pain doesn't make you weak. Your tears don't make you faithless. Your exhaustion doesn't mean you've failed God. Sometimes faith looks like surviving another day. Sometimes faith is simply whispering, "God, I don't understand this, but please don't leave me." And maybe that prayer is more powerful than you realize. Because here's something beautiful about God. Even when your faith feels small, He still listens. Even when your prayers feel messy, He still listens. Even when all you can do is cry, He still listens. Because God does not measure faith by perfection. He measures honesty. And maybe for the first time in a long time, you need permission to stop pretending you're okay. You don't always have to sound strong. You don't always have to hide the struggle. God already sees the pain you never tell anyone about. The anxiety, the fear, the disappointment, the nights you smile in front of people but cry when nobody's around. He sees all of it. And if you've made it this far into the video, I truly believe this message found you for a reason. So let me ask you something deeply personal. What if you are closer to breakthrough than you think? What if the thing you've been praying for is already moving in ways you cannot yet see? Because sometimes God works silently, not invisibly, silently. There's a difference. Silence does not mean absence. It means trust. Think about Joseph again. Everything looked impossible, until suddenly it wasn't. One day he was forgotten in prison. Then suddenly, everything changed. David went from hiding in caves to becoming king. Job went from unbearable suffering to restoration. And again throughout the Bible, something incredible happens. The silence eventually breaks. The waiting eventually shifts. The pain eventually teaches something. But here's what people rarely talk about. The breakthrough often comes when people are closest to quitting. That moment when faith feels impossible. When hope feels weak. When nothing makes sense anymore. Sometimes that is the exact moment things begin to move. And I wonder, what if quitting now means walking away one chapter before things change? What if you're closer than you realize? What if God is building something in silence that would completely blow your mind if you could see it today? You may not understand your season now, but one day, you might look back and say, "Now I understand why God made me wait." And I know that doesn't remove the pain immediately. I know waiting still hurts. I know unanswered prayers can feel crushing. But maybe today isn't about understanding everything. Maybe today is simply about choosing not to quit. Choosing to trust one more day. Choosing to pray one more prayer. Choosing to believe one more time. Because faith is not always loud. Sometimes faith whispers, "I'm exhausted, but I'm still here." And if that's you today, I want you to write this in the comments. "I'm still here." Because I believe there are people watching this who need to know they're not struggling alone. And if this message has encouraged you even a little, take 1 second to leave a like. But here's what nobody tells you about God's silence. Sometimes the hardest waiting season becomes the exact moment everything begins to change. And what happened next in the Bible completely changed the way people saw suffering forever.